Thanks, Yingsun. I will continue with some of the threads that have been spun in this dialogue. And we can begin with the global city. So the two words that comprise this term, global and city, suggests, of course, we really talked about the, looking towards the world as a way to sort of seek certain forms of identity, connections, economic or otherwise. And then the other term, city, suggests that urbanization is the thrust, right, to modernity, to a better economic status, which is something that most countries were converting their towns, right, into cities and so on and so forth. So the global city, as an idea, right, came about, I think, about 7 years after Singapore got independence, around 1972, when the then Foreign Minister and S. Rajaratnam proposed the idea of a global city. And of course, we can understand it historically that because of the so-called loss of hinterland, right, the prolonged trysts with Indonesia, and then of course separation from Malaysia, that Singapore had to sort of leapfrog, so-called leapfrog over the region, right, and then to make connections with the world networks. Right? So this then means that for the period of time that we have been looking at this idea of the global city, that the identities are also connected with the ideas of the global city, to understand the world as it is and so on and so forth. So in the book, right, Kheng Soon invited me to say something about this, and I firmly believe that first of all, I think we need to rethink about the idea of the global city, right? And if we are to think about our identities going forward, that there should be, to put it simply, 3 levels of identity, right? So if you think about identity as a kind of a sphere, right, with a person in the middle, then of course you have the immediate surrounding, right, your family, your home, and all that. The first level can kind of roughly be gauged in terms of Singapore, right, as a whole. So knowing the histories of Singapore, something very local, I think it's something that we need to pursue very diligently now, right? To understand what is the history of this place. The history of this place, I think, has been written, but I think it has also been written in relation to the developmental histories of Singapore, the global city, and so on and so forth. So that is the first sphere, if you will, first part of that sphere, which is closest to us, which is the personal identities, right? Knowing Singapore much better. Then the second level, or second outer sort of a level, would be the region, right? So if in the global city, this has been overlooked in part because of the sort of developmental histories and so on and so forth. So understanding this second level of reconnecting much deeper with the region is something that is quite important. Right? Sorry. In 1967, of course, there is a formation of ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, beginning with 6, and then now we have 11. I have some problems with the term ASEAN, because I think then it means that you are couching it in terms of, it's become a shorthand, right? So a lot of people use it as shorthand. But if you think about Southeast Asia, of course, it has a much longer history prior to 1967, when that association was formed mainly for politics, for business, and sometimes, right, if they can afford it, some aspects of culture, right? So cultural connections and so forth. The culture is not very high on the agenda of ASEAN. But if you then look back at the histories of Southeast Asia, as opposed to ASEAN, there's a lot to offer us and a lot of things that we can understand reflexively, right, looking at and understanding neighboring countries and then reflexively understanding ourselves. So my proposal, right, for more enlightened kind of Singaporean citizen in this future is a person who can sort of go through these different spheres as easily as one understands sort of a global sphere. So let me return to some examples, right, in Singapore, how we can better sort of understand the histories. I often ask my students, do you know why there are so many Chukangs in Singapore? Right? You have Lim Chu Kang, Cha Chu Kang, Yeoh Chu Kang. There used to be Chan Chu Kang, right? Tan Chu Kang, and believe it or not, there was a Hua Chu Kang. So it's now, sort of inundated because of MacRitchie Reservoir. There was a Hua Chu Kang. So the Chu Kang was a system that was also connected with the Sultan of Johor, right? Because they signed, Singapore, the Sultan signed 2 treaties. And before the British were able to fully take hold of the whole island, he signed further treaties, like Kangchu treaties with overseas Chinese, right, predominantly Teochew, to set up watersheds for the planting of pepper and gambia, right. So each of the Kangchus, right, the person in charge of a Chukang, would have jurisdiction, right? The Sultan would send him some guards, right? So he has some policemen, and then there are certain structures that are set up. So in terms of a structure, the Chukang is a kind of a spatial structure that is in the north of Singapore, right? And of course the Kangchu, right? The surname of the surname of the Kangchu would then be ascribed to the Chukang. So you have Lim Chukang, right? You have Chua Chukang, and so on and so forth. So I think it would be interesting to sort of understand, like, Singapore's history as, first of all, the system that's set up in the northern shores, but also as a way to sort of understand ecological consequences, right? Because it was a kind of agricultural system, right, of planting pepper and gambia, and then of course it developed from there. So unfortunately, Chan Chu Kang, which is actually quite close to Nisu, of course now most people don't know where it is, and so on and so forth. So that's one example of just ways of understanding Singapore history, very very broadly. For me, I think this is something that every Singaporean should know. Every time they go to take the train and arrive at Choa Chu Kang, that they should know, and they should be able to tell their friends, right, overseas friends, right, why is it called Choa Chu Kang, and so on and so forth, right? And of course, this history permeates through the entire island as well. Right? I'm of the opinion that every part of Singapore has a history, right? And also, I can also please ask everyone not to use the term Ulu anymore. To suggest this place is a remote place, and there's a Chinese term for it, and Yao Bu Shen Dan. So the term Ulu has to be used in the proper context. The term Ulu has been wrongly used by the colonials, and they're sort of continuing this mistake, because for Singapore, or for the Malay Singaporeans at the time, right, Ulu is a kind of directional system. It is just upriver, right? So you have Ulu Sembawang, because it's a Sembawang river, and then there is a Hilir, right? So the part of the river that's closer to the river mouth is Hilir. The part that's further away towards the head, right? That's why we have the word Penghulu, right? Penghulu. So you can only say that the place is really remote if there is a river. So there is sort of spatial ideas about that. Yeah, and then if we come to sort of even housing developments, right? So I often tell a lot of friends, right, and to say that you can't call this station between Clementi Road and Jurong King Albert Park. It is not King Albert Park, but King Albert Park. And the reason why it's so should be pronounced as King Albert Park, and incidentally, the funny thing is that in Chinese, it's actually correct because this is Yeoh. So Yeoh. So why King Albert Park? King should be called King Albert Park, and it's because a lot of the early housing estates were developed by a Belgian developer called Credit Foncier. Right? And Credit Foncier actually were pioneers of private housing estates. So King Albert Park actually was a kind of pioneer estate, right? Because they realized that they at that point in time, right, real estate was very messy. Right? You had this thing called the T-money scandal, right, where you have to pay developers, for to build on land. Right? If you want to get electricity and water from the colonial government at the time, you have to seek their help, so they would charge a lot. And so what happened was Credit Foncier said, right, well, we should simplify this for you, right? We will take care of internal roads, we will provide you with sewage, right? We will have water and electricity cable, let us take care of the colonial government's connection, and so on and so forth. So King Albert Park was formed. It was one of the first private housing estates. And so it went on to create, and why King Albert Park was because it was to honor one of their kings, a Belgian king, King Albert, in the same way that they also honored Queen Astrid Park, which was also a kind of a Belgian royalty. So they went on to build a lot of places, Namli Park, Binjai Park. So this was a very important one, and they were even able to consolidate land to sell to Chongqing High School with the lake, right, as kind of a real estate. So unfortunately, this Credit Foncier closed, right, and it folded. It first folded. It was expanding very quickly in China. So in the sense, you need to know the regional history. And then, of course, in 1949, the land was nationalized. So there was no more private land that could be owned, and all of these developments were taken back. And so Credit Foncier suffered. Right? So they tried to hang on. They lost China, the cities in China, but they still had Hong Kong, and they had Singapore. But subsequently, I believe it's 1950s, it folded completely. So we have no trace of a developer who had impacts on the name, who had impacts on a kind of a kind of a form of public housing estate, and it's sort of a lost history. So there are so many instances like this. So for example, we talked about I'm going to talk about JTC and Jurong. And again, right, if you want to talk about Jurong, we also need to link it to the Garden City kind of moniker for Singapore, because when Jurong was formed, right, Working Street promoted and of course JTC promoted the idea of not only an industrial estate. It was to be called Jurong Garden Industrial Estate. Jurong Garden Industrial Estate. And if those of us who know what the Garden City idea was from UK, right, you have Ebenezer Howard towards the end of the 19th century, right, promoting this idea of a garden city because of industrialized London primarily, and to have zones, right, separating the key area of London from satellite towns. But then, of course, you would have belts of park, right, radiating outwards from London. So in the case of Jurong, it is actually, I was trying to tell you that this actually is a very, it's one of its, the idea is one of its kind, right? The Jurong Garden Industrial Estate. And what the Jurong Garden Industrial Estate entails is not the radial system that the London kind of a garden city idea or subsequent garden cities that were promoted in the US. It was completely different. It was, Jurong was to be gridded up. Right? So first of all, you have the heavy industries, you have the medium industries, you have the light industries, progressively away from the sea, right, the rivers. But then it was also cut up so that, you know, and so the idea was not zones of green. The idea was pieces of green everywhere along within Jurong itself, right? So this is the reason why even the naming of the housing estates are linked to this idea. Taman Jurong, Peban Gardens, Pandan Gardens. So the idea in itself is already to create the town which has affinity to landscape, to gardens. Then you have the preponderance of green spaces. You have the Chinese garden, you have the Japanese garden, you have the whole Jurong Lake, Jurong Hill, and so on and so forth. So although, you know, a lot of the environment, you know, the hills were cut and so on and so forth, but the idea is actually quite a novel one. I don't think, as far as I know, you know, this is the only one in the world that has that kind of concept of a garden industrial estate, not in the way that the sort of a London kind of belts of green and so on and so on, but a different form. So I think this is quite important, at least, right, for at least, you know, architecture students or planning students to understand, but also to then able to say what Jurong was, or what was the form that Jurong has taken. So it's an ongoing search. Sometimes I feel very lonely because nobody really wants to know these things. But I think it is tremendously interesting that every part of Singapore has a story. So even if you just say one of the places that are named after trees, right, like Changi, Tampines, so you can get certain narratives. So this is just Singapore, right? And what I have been teaching is about Southeast Asia, and of course then that expands manifold, right? Because you then have to look across the immediate neighbors, right, Malaysia and Indonesia, and then also other connections elsewhere. So for example, you can't really know Pulau Keong without knowing the history of the Pahang Empire. Because there was a sort of a war in Pahang, and then people retreated to Pulau Keong and sort of set up there. Right? At the end of Lim Chu Kang, there is a house over the water called a pier house. It used to belong to Howard Crescent, who was a lawyer who also settled cases for the Johor Sultan, who would travel from Johor to his house by boat, because they didn't care about immigration or something. And then Howard Crescent would also sometimes, you know, take a boat and go up. So that's just within the Singapore borders. And then you have, and you know, you probably, you know, this people of this vintage will probably have known The King and I. The King and I, the story of The King and I would not have happened without the Singapore connection, because Anna was actually sent from Singapore to become, you know, the sort of nurse, or whatever we call it, for the.
Apparently, she was living in Rideout Road.
That must be a good class bungalow, right?
Kheng Soon, yes, there's a Yeoh's family.
Yeoh's, yeah, Anna Yeoh's, yeah, that's right. So the Thailand connection. Then the house that is connected to the revolution in China, right, the Sun Yat-sen Villa, was actually built for Teo Eng Hock's mother, right? Mother or mother-in-law. Right? And the mother-in-law actually came from Bangka in Indonesia. Right? So it's from one of the islands. So Bangka was settled in by quite a lot of overseas Chinese. And then, of course, Teo Heng Hock's mother-in-law, then came to Singapore. And when I was in Bangka, I was very shocked because you can then see the connections between a house that she was staying in Bangka and in a town called Mentok, right? and in Singapore. So the sort of connective histories with Southeast Asia just is quite mind-boggling, and we're still trying to find out more. But the purpose of these examples is really to say that I think the identities, right? I have no qualms about being a global citizen and understanding all kinds of histories. But I think it's also imperative if we are to be find other forms of identities, that also to find the Singapore identity in terms of what kind of histories we have. And then also all these other economic, social, and all other kind of histories that are connected back to Southeast Asia. So that's actually my plea, and it's also a continuation of my search. Thank you.
Yeah.